Section 2, Letters 6 to 10. Letter the 6th. The Vicomte de Valmont to the Marquise de Merteuil.
There is never a woman, then, but abuses the empire she has known how to seize. And yourself, you whom I have so often dubbed my indulgent friend, you have discarded the title, and are not afraid to attack me in the object of my affections. With what traits you venture to depict Madame de Tourvel! What man but would have paid with his life for such insolent boldness? What woman other than yourself would have escaped without receiving at least an ungracious retort? In mercy, put me not to such tests. I will not answer for my power to sustain them. In the name of friendship, wait until I have had this woman, if you wish to revile her. Do you not know that pleasure alone has the right to remove the bandage from love's eyes? But what am I saying? Has Madame de Tourvel any need of illusion? No, for to be adorable she has only need to be herself. You reproach her with dressing badly. I quite agree, all adornment is hurtful to her. Nothing that conceals her adorns. It is in the freedom of her négligé that she is really ravishing. Thanks to the distressing heat which we are experiencing, a déshabille of simple stuff permits me to see her round and supple figure. Only a piece of muslin covers her breast, and my furtive but penetrating gaze has already seized its enchanting form. Her face, say you, has no expression. And what should it express in moments when nothing speaks to her heart? No, doubtless she has not, like our coquettes, that false glance which is sometimes seductive and always deceives. She knows not how to gloss over the emptiness of a phrase by a studied smile, and although she has the loveliest teeth in the world, she never laughs except when she is amused. But you should see, in some frolicsome game, of what a frank and innocent gaiety she will present the image. Near some poor wretch whom she is eager to succour, what a pure joy and compassionate kindness her gaze denotes. You should see above all how at the least word of praise or flattery her heavenly face is tinged with the touching embarrassment of a modesty that is not feigned. She is a prude and devout, and so you judge her to be cold and inanimate. I think very differently. What amazing sensibility she must have, that it can reach even her husband, and that she can always love a person who is always absent. What stronger proof would you desire? Yet I have been able to procure another. I directed her walk in such a manner that a ditch had to be crossed, and although she is very agile, she is even more timid. You can well believe how much a prude fears to cross the ditch.
Note: one sees here the deplorable taste for puns, which was becoming the fashion, and which has since made so much progress.
She was obliged to trust herself to me. I held this modest woman in my arms. Our preparations and the passage of my old aunt had caused the playful Divot to peal with laughter, but when I had once taken hold of her, by a happy awkwardness, Our arms were interlaced. I pressed her breast against my own, and in this short interval I felt her heart beat faster. An amiable flush suffused her face, and her modest embarrassment taught me well enough that her heart had throbbed with love and not with fear. My aunt, however, was deceived, as you are, and said, "The child was frightened." But the charming candour of the child did not permit her to lie, and she answered naively, "Oh no, but—" That alone was an illumination. From that moment the sweetness of hope has succeeded to my cruel uncertainty. I shall possess this woman. I shall steal her from the husband who profanes her. I will even dare ravish her from the God whom she adores. What delight to be in turns the object and the victor of her remorse! Far be it from me to destroy the prejudices which sway her mind. They will add to my happiness and my triumph. Let her believe in virtue, and sacrifice it to me. Let the idea of falling terrify her, without preventing her fall, and may she, shaken by 1,000 terrors, forget them, vanquish them, only in my arms. Then, I agree, let her say to me, "I adore thee." She alone among women is worthy to pronounce these words. I shall be truly the God whom she has preferred. Let us be candid. In our arrangements, as cold as they are facile, what we call happiness is hardly even a pleasure. Shall I tell you? I thought my heart was withered, and finding nothing left but my senses, I lamented my premature old age. Madame de Tourvel has restored to me the charming illusions of youth. With her I have no need of pleasure to be happy. The only thing which frightens me is the time which this adventure is going to take, for I dare leave nothing to chance. 'Tis in vain I recall my fortunate audacities. I cannot bring myself to put them in practice here. To become truly happy, I require her to give herself, and that is no slight affair. I am sure that you admire my prudence. I have not yet pronounced the word love, but we have already come to those of confidence and interest. To deceive her as little as possible, and above all to counteract the effect of stories which might come to her ears, I have myself told her, as though in self-accusation, of some of my most notorious traits. You would laugh to see the candour with which she lectures me. She wishes, she says, to convert me. She has no suspicion as yet of what it will cost her to try. She is far from thinking that in pleading, to use her own words, for the unfortunates I have ruined, she speaks in anticipation of her own cause. This idea struck me yesterday in the midst of one of her dissertations, and I could not resist the pleasure of interrupting her to tell her that she spoke like a prophet. Adieu, my fairest of friends. You see that I am not lost beyond all hope of return. P.S. By the way, that poor Chevalier, has he killed himself from despair? truly you are 100-fold naughtier person than myself, and you would humiliate me if I had any vanity. At the Château de 9th of August, 17.
Letter the 7th. Cécile Volanges to Sophie Carnet. Note: not to abuse the reader's patience, many of the letters in this correspondence, from day to day, have been suppressed. Only those have been given which have been found necessary for the elucidation of events. For the same reason, all the replies of Sophie Carnet and many letters of the other actors in these adventures have been omitted.
If I have told you nothing more about my marriage, it is because I know no more about it than I did the first day. I am accustoming myself to think no more of it, and I am quite satisfied with my manner of life. I study much at my singing and my harp. It seems to me that I like them better since I have no longer a master, or perhaps it is because I have a better one. Monsieur le Chevalier d'Ancenis, the gentleman of whom I told you, and with whom I sang at Madame de Merteuil's, is kind enough to come here every day, and to sing with me for whole hours. He is extremely amiable. He sings like an angel, and composes very pretty airs, to which he also does the words. It is a great pity that he is a Knight of Malta. It seems to me that, if he were to marry, his wife would be very happy. He has a charming gentleness. He never has the air of paying you a compliment, and yet everything he says flatters you. He takes me up constantly, now about my music, now about something else, but he mingles his criticisms with so much gaiety and interest that it is impossible not to be grateful for them. If he only looks at you, it seems as though he were saying something gracious. Added to all that, he is very obliging. For instance, yesterday he was invited to a great concert. He preferred to spend the whole evening at mamma's. That pleased me very much, for when he is not here, nobody talks to me, and I bore myself, whereas, when he is here, we sing and talk together. He and Madame de Merteuil are the only two persons I find amiable. But adieu, my dearest friend. I have promised to learn for to-day a little air, with a very difficult accompaniment, and I would not break my word. I am going to practice it until he comes. Paris, 7th of August, 17.
Letter the 8th. The Présidente de Tourvel to Madame de Volanges.
No one, madame, can be more sensible than I to the confidence you show in me, nor take a keener interest in the establishment of Mademoiselle de Volanges. It is indeed from my whole heart that I wish her a happiness of which I make no doubt she is worthy, and which your prudence will secure. I do not know Monsieur le Comte de Gercourt, but being honoured by your choice, I cannot but form a favourable opinion of him. I confine myself, madame, to wishing for this marriage a success as assured as my own, which is equally your handiwork, and for which each fresh day adds to my gratitude. May the happiness of your daughter be the reward of that which you have procured for me, and may the best of friends be also the happiest of mothers. I am really grieved that I cannot offer you by word of mouth the homage of this sincere wish, nor make the acquaintance of Mademoiselle de Volanges so soon as I should wish. After having known your truly maternal kindness, I have a right to hope from her the tender friendship of a sister. I beg you, madame, to be so good as to ask this from her in my behalf, while I wait until I have the opportunity of deserving it. I expect to remain in the country all the time of Monsieur de Tourvel's absence. I have taken advantage of this leisure to enjoy and profit by the society of the venerable Madame de Rosemonde. This lady is always charming. Her great age has deprived her of nothing. She retains all her memory and sprightliness. Her body alone is 84 years old. Her mind is only 20. Our seclusion is enlivened by her nephew, the Vicomte de Valmont, who has cared to devote a few days to us. I knew him only by his reputation, which gave me small desire to make his acquaintance, but he seems to me to be better than that. Here, where he is not spoilt by the hubbub of the world, he talks rationally, with extraordinary ease, and excuses himself for his errors with rare candour. He speaks to me with much confidence, and I preach to him with great severity. You, who know him, will admit that it would be a fine conversion to make, but I suspect, in spite of his promises, that a week of Paris will make him forget all my sermons. His sojourn here will be at least so much saved from his ordinary course of conduct, and I think, from his fashion of life, that what he can best do is to do nothing at all. He knows that I am engaged in writing to you, and has charged me to present you with his respectful homage. Pray accept my own also, with the goodness that I know in you, and never doubt the sincere sentiments with which I have had the honour to be, etc. At the Château de 9th August, 17 .
Letter the 9th. Madame de Volanges to the Présidente de Tourvel. I have never doubted, my fair and youthful friend, either of the kindness which you have for me, or of the sincere interest which you take in all that concerns me. It is not to elucidate that point, which I hope is settled between us, that I reply to your reply, but I cannot refrain from having a talk with you on the subject of the Vicomte de Valmont. I did not expect, I confess, ever to come across that name in your letters. Indeed, what can there be in common between you and him? You do not know this man. Where should you have obtained any idea of the soul of a libertine? You speak to me of his rare candour? Yes, indeed, the candour of Valmont must be most rare, even more false and dangerous than he is amiable and seductive. Never since his extreme youth has he taken a step or uttered a word without having some end in view which was either dishonourable or criminal. My dear, you know me. You know whether, of all the virtues which I try to acquire, charity be not the one which I cherish the most. So that, if Valmont were led away by the vehemence of his passions, if, like 1,000 others, he were seduced by the errors of his age, and wait in silence for the time when a happy reformation should restore him the esteem of honest folk. But Valmont is not like that. His conduct is the consequence of his principles. He can calculate to a nicety how many atrocities a man may allow himself to commit without compromising himself, and, in order to be cruel and mischievous with impunity, he has selected women to be his victims. I will not stop to count all those whom he has seduced, but how many has he not ruined utterly? In the quiet and retired life which you lead, these scandalous stories do not reach your ears. I could tell you some which would make you shudder, but your eyes, which are as pure as your soul, would be defiled by such pictures. Secure of being in no danger from Valmont, you have no need of such arms wherewith to defend yourself. The only thing which I may tell you is that out of all the women to whom he has paid attention, with or without success, there is not one who has not had cause to complain of him. The Marquise de Merteuil is the single exception to this general rule. She alone knew how to withstand and disarm his villainy. I must confess that this episode in her life is that which does her most honour in my eyes. It has also sufficed to justify her fully, in the eyes of all, for certain inconsistencies with which one had to reproach her at the commencement of her widowhood. Note: the error into which Madame de Volanges falls shows us that, like other criminals, Valmont did not betray his accomplices. End of note. However this may be, my fair friend, what age, experience, and above all friendship, empower me to represent to you is that the absence of Valmont is beginning to be noticed in the world, and that, if it becomes known that he has for some time made a third party to his end and you, your reputation will be in his hands, the greatest misfortune which can befall a woman. I advise you, then, to persuade his aunt not to keep him there longer, and, if he insists upon remaining, I think you should not hesitate to leave him in possession. But why should he stay? What is he doing in your part of the country? If you were to spy upon his proceedings, I am sure you would discover that he only came there to have a more convenient shelter for some black deed he is contemplating in the neighborhood. But, as it is impossible to remedy the evil, let us be content by ourselves avoiding it. Farewell, my lovely friend. At present the marriage of my daughter is a little delayed. The Comte de Gercourt, whom we expected from day to day, tells me that his regiment is ordered to Corsica, and as military operations are still afoot, it will be impossible for him to absent himself before the winter. This vexes me, but it causes me to hope that we shall have the pleasure of seeing you at the wedding, and I was sorry that it was to have taken place without you. Adieu. I am, unreservedly and without compliment, entirely yours. P.S. Recall me to the recollection of Madame de Rosemonde, whom I always love as dearly as she deserves. Paris, 11th of August, 1700. Letter the 10th. The Marquise de Merteuil to the Vicomte de Valmont.
Vicomte, are you angry with me? Or are you indeed dead? Or, what would not be unlike that, are you living only for your présidente? This woman who has restored you the illusions of youth will soon restore you also its ridiculous prejudices. Here you are, already timid and a slave. You might as well be amorous. You renounce your fortunate audacities. Behold you then conducting yourself without principles, and trusting all to hazard, or rather to caprice. Do you no longer remember that love, like medicine, is nothing but the art of assisting nature? You see that I beat you with your own arms, but I will not plume myself on that. It is indeed beating a man when he is down. She must give herself, you tell me. Ah, no doubt she must. She will give herself like the others, with this difference, that it will be with a bad grace. But if the end is that she should give herself, the true way is to begin by taking her. This absurd distinction is indeed a true sign of love's madness. I say love, for you are in love. To speak to you otherwise would be to cheat you, it would be to hide from you your ill. Tell me then, languid lover, the women whom you have had, did you think you had violated them? Why, however desirous one may be of giving one's self, however eager one may be, one still needs a pretext, and is there any more convenient for us than that which gives us the air of yielding to force? For me, I confess, one of the things which flatter me the most is a well-timed and lively assault, where everything succeeds in order, although with rapidity, which never throws us into the painful embarrassment of having ourselves to repair a gaucherie from which, on the contrary, we should have profited, which is cunning to maintain the air of violence even in things which we grant, and to flatter adroitly our two favourite passions, the glory of resistance and the pleasure of defeat. I grant that this talent, rarer than one may think, has always given me pleasure, even when it has not seduced me, and that sometimes, solely for recompense, it has induced me to yield. So, in our ancient tourneys, beauty gave the prize of valour and skill. But you, who are no longer you, are behaving as if you were afraid of success. Ha! Since when do you travel by short stages and cross-roads? My friend, when one wishes to arrive, post-horses and the highway. But let us drop this subject, which is all the more distasteful to me, in that it deprives me of the pleasure of seeing you. At least write to me more often than you do, and keep me informed of your progress. Do you know that it is now more than a fortnight since you have been occupied by this ridiculous adventure, and have neglected all the world? Apropos of negligence, you are like those people who send regularly to inquire after their sick friends, but who never trouble to get a reply. You finish your last letter by asking me if the Chevalier be dead. I do not answer, and you are no longer in the least concerned. Are you no longer aware that my lover is your born friend? But reassure yourself he is not dead, or if he were, it would be for excess of joy. This poor Chevalier, how tender he is! How excellently is he made for love! How well he knows how to feel intensely! It makes my head reel. Seriously, the perfect happiness which he derives from being loved by me gives me a real attachment for him. The very same day upon which I wrote to you that I was going to promote a rupture, how happy I made him! Yet I was mightily occupied when they announced him about the means of putting him in despair. Was it reason or caprice, he never seemed to me so fine. I nevertheless received him with temper. He hoped to pass 2 hours with me before the time when my door would be open to everybody. I told him that I was going out. He asked me whither I was going. I refused to tell him. He insisted. "Where I shall not have your company," I answered acidly. Luckily for himself, he stood as though petrified by this answer, for had he said a word, a scene would infallibly have ensued, which would have led to the projected rupture. Astonished by his silence, I cast my eyes upon him, with no other intention, upon my oath, than to see what countenance he would shew. I discovered on that charming face that sorrow, at once so tender and so profound, to which, you yourself have admitted, it is so difficult to resist. Like causes produce like effects. I was vanquished a second time. From that moment I was only busy in finding a means of preventing him from having a grievance against me. "I am going out on business," said I with a somewhat gentler air. "Nay, even on business which concerns you, but do not question me further. I shall sup at home, return, and you shall know all." At this he recovered the power of speech, but I did not permit him to use it. "I am in great haste," I continue. "Leave me until this evening." He kissed my hand and went away. Immediately, to compensate him, perhaps to compensate myself, I decided to acquaint him with my petite maison, of which he had no suspicion. I called my faithful Victoire. I have my headache, I am gone to bed for all my household, and left alone at last with my trustee, whilst she disguises herself as a lackey, I don the costume of a waiting-maid. She next calls a hackney coach to the gate of my garden, and behold us on our way. Arrived in this temple of love, I chose the most gallant of déshabillés. This one is delicious. It is my own invention. It lets nothing be seen, and yet allows you to divine all. I promise you a pattern of it for your présidente, when you have rendered her worthy to wear it. After these preliminaries, whilst Victoire busies herself with other details, I read a chapter of Le Sopha, a letter of Héloïse, and 2 tales of La Fontaine, in order to rehearse the different tones which I would assume. Meantime, my Chevalier arrives at my door with his accustomed zeal. My porter denies him, and informs him that I am ill. Incident the first. At the same time he hands him a note from me, but not in my handwriting, after my prudent rule. He opens it, and sees written therein in Victoire's hand, "At 9 o'clock, punctually, on the boulevard, in front of the cafés." Thither he betakes himself, and there a little lackey, whom he does not know, whom he believes, at least, that he does not know, for of course it was Victoire, comes and informs him that he must dismiss his carriage and follow her. All this romantic promenade helped me all the more to heat his mind, and a hot head is by no means undesirable. At last he arrives, and love and amazement produced in him a veritable enchantment. To give him time to recover, we strolled out for a while in the little wood, then I took him back again to the house. He sees at first 2 covers laid, then a bed prepared. We pass into the boudoir, which was richly adorned. There, half pensively, half in sentiment, I threw my arms round him and fell on my knees. "Oh, my friend," said I, "in my desire to reserve the surprise of this moment for you, I reproach myself with having grieved you with a pretence of ill humour, with having been able for an instant to veil my heart to your gaze. Pardon me my wrongs, the strength of my love shall expiate them." You may judge of the effect of this sentimental oration. The happy chevalier lifted me up, and my pardon was sealed on that very same ottoman where you and I once sealed so gallantly, and in like fashion, our eternal rupture. As we had 6 hours to pass together, and I had resolved to make all this time equally delicious for him, I moderated his transports, and brought an amiable coquetry to replace tenderness. I do not think that I have ever been at so great pains to please, nor that I have ever been so pleased with myself. After supper, by turns childish and reasonable, sensible and gay, even libertine at times, it was my pleasure to look upon him as a sultan in the heart of his seraglio, of which I was, by turn, the different favourites. In fact, his repeated acts of homage, although always received by the same woman, were ever received by a different mistress. Finally, at the approach of day, we were obliged to separate, and whatever he might say, or even do, to prove to me the contrary, he had as much need of separation as he had little desire of it. At the moment when we left the house, and for a last adieu, I took the key of his abode of bliss, and giving it into his hands, "I had it but for you," said I. "It is right that you should be its master. It is for him who sacrifices to have the disposition of my temple." By such a piece of adroitness I anticipated him from the reflections which might have been suggested to him by the possession, always suspicious, of a petite maison. I know him well enough to be sure that he will never make use of it except for me, and if the whim seized me to go there without him, I have a second key. He would at all costs fix a day for return, but I love him still too well to care to exhaust him too soon. One must not permit one's self excesses, except with persons whom one wishes soon to leave. He does not know that himself, but happily for him, I have knowledge for 2. I perceive that it is 3 o'clock in the morning, and that I have written a volume with the intention but to write a word. Such is the charm of constant friendship. 'Tis on account of that you are always he whom I love the best. But, in truth, the Chevalier pleases me more. Paris, 12th of August, 17.
End of section 2.